during the debate this morning, the member from Kingston and the Islands, the member from Vancouver, Granville, and the member from Winnipeg North all alluded to the fact that it was the member from Wellington Halton Hills who knew and did nothing, Mr. Speaker.
Shameful.
That is a form of victim abuse. That is not acceptable for this House, and it pains me to see members of the government, parliamentary secretaries, building a narrative to discredit an honourable member of this chamber, Mr. Speaker. It has to stop, and they need to apologize today. Mr. Speaker, the government is defensive, and they're defensive for a very good reason. And it goes back to the 2020 report of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians covering their actions in 2019. Of particular interest is Chapter 2 of this report, the government response to foreign interference, which notes, I will add, Mr. Speaker, that Canada's allies have identified interference as a significant threat and initiated various countermeasures. And I quote, "Foreign interference in Canada has received minimal media and academic coverage and is not part of the wider public discourse." Wow, have things changed since 2020. In their review of foreign interference activities, this nonpartisan committee, which only issues reports if every member of Parliament of said committee agrees to them, found the following few items. Finding number 8, that some foreign states conduct sophisticated and pervasive foreign interference activities against Canada. Those activities pose significant risk to national security, principally by undermining Canada's fundamental institutions and eroding the rights and freedoms of Canadians. That can be found in paragraphs 136 to 175. Finding number 9, Mr. Speaker, CSIS has consistently conducted investigations and provided evidence to government on foreign interference, paragraphs 195 to 201. Finding number 10, Mr. Speaker, throughout the period under review, the interdepartmental coordination and collaboration on foreign interference was case-specific and ad hoc. Canada's ability to address foreign interference is limited by the absence, and I quote, "a holistic approach to consider relevant risks, appropriate tools, and possible implications of responses to state behaviours." Parliamentarians can find that in paragraphs 219 to 227 and 280 to 285. Finding number 11, Mr. Speaker, foreign interference has received historically less attention in Canada than other national security threats. This is beginning to change with the government's nascent focus on hostile state activities, but nonetheless, the security and intelligence community's approach to addressing the threat is still marked by a number of conditions. There are significant differences in how individual security and intelligence organizations interpret the gravity and prevalence of the threat. In determining the measures the government may use to address instances of foreign interference, responses address specific activities and not patterns of behavior. Finding number 12 outlined that government engagement on foreign interference has also been limited. With the exception of CSIS outreach activities, the government's interaction with subnational levels of government and civil society on foreign interference is just minimal. Engagement is limited in part by the lack of security-cleared individuals at the subnational level, but there is no at the subnational level. Another point of consideration is that there is no public interference strategy or public reports similar to those developed for terrorism or cyber security. Mr. Speaker, I could go on, but my time is limited today. The committee made a number of recommendations on actions that the government could take to combat foreign interference, and yet none of those have been taken today. We have still not seen a foreign registry tabled in this Parliament, and we have still not seen real action by this government. The only reason we're seeing any action today is because of Robert Fife in the Globe and Mail.
Hear, hear.
So recommendation 5 in this report says that the Government of Canada must develop a comprehensive strategy to counter foreign interference and build institutional and public resiliency. Drawing from the committee's review and findings, such a strategy should include identifying short and long-term risks and harm to Canadian institutions and rights and freedoms posed by the threat of foreign interference. Point B, examine and address the full range of institutional vulnerabilities targeted by hostile foreign states, including areas expressly omitted in the committee's review. Point C, assess the adequacy of existing legislation that deals with foreign interference, such as the Security or Information Act or the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act, and make proposals for changes if required. And point D, develop practical, whole-of-government operational and policy mechanisms to develop and respond to the activities of hostile states. Point E, establish regular mechanisms to work with subnational levels of government. Point F, include an approach for ministers and senior officials to engage with fundamental institutions and the public. And point G, guide cooperations with allies and foreign interference. Point 6, that the Government of Canada support this comprehensive strategy through sustained central leadership and a review of legislation. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, the government has done nothing outlined in the 2020 report. The only reason we are here today, and the only reason the Conservative Party has brought this motion forward to establish a foreign agent registry, to establish a national public inquiry, to close down the People's Republic police offices in Canada? My gosh! What is happening to our sovereignty? And I will state this emotional appeal.
I believe we have a point of order from the Honourable Deputy Whip. Deputy House Leader, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I understand the member opposite is passionate. However, for the sake of the interpreters, I'd ask that he not scream.
Mr. Speaker,
I still have. Okay. So the Honourable Member of Mission Massey for Asia Canada.
The passion in which I speak today is because I am scared that our sovereignty is at stake, that this government has been negligent in its responsibilities to Canada, and that the country I knew as a young man is not the country of today. Mr. Speaker, I can remember in the early 2000s, it was a big national news when members of the American government, of the FBI, came into Canada. Man, was Canada upset. Yet we stand negligent today when a foreign dictatorship that does not have the interests of Canada at heart establishes a police office in our country, Mr. Speaker. I will conclude that this government has been defensive. They need to vote with we need to vote with the official opposition and take immediate actions to rectify the grave and serious problems they have caused in our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.